Today we're turning cereal and pizza boxes like these into beautiful collage cards like these. This is a viewer requested video because so many of you asked me to share how I make them when I shared them in my brown paper journal tutorial that I made last week. The 5 steps that I use are really simple to follow, and of course I use cheap and readily accessible supplies so that you can do it too. I have specific examples of making the cards using book pages, but I also use some printables and sometimes I mix them up. The key point is that the 5-step process allows you to master making these cards using whatever you have. The 3 steps are here. Take a screenshot or find them with over 70 others over on Pinterest. The agenda for today's video is in 3 parts. We're going to walk through that 5-step process for making journal cards like these, but I also specifically want to share some of the books that I use for images in these cards, because I don't want to be just reliant on digitals or printables, whatever you want to call them. So I will share some of these books with you. I've pulled quite a few off my shelf and I'll explain why these work for journal cards like these. And then what I'll do is I'll get you a chair next to my desk and we can just look at a few of these examples and I'll illustrate how I use the supplies that I suggest you use to have so much fun mastering making collage cards. And the first thing you want to do is make your journal card bases. You want to make a lot of bases because this is a lot of fun and you'll just get addicted and want to make absolutely loads. I did this yesterday because I wanted to save time, but I found that when I made the bases there were a few points I wanted to share, so I thought I'd just walk through those with you today. I gathered some card that I've been keeping in my craft room for recycling and I just started to dismantle them. I pulled them to bits and I cut off the flaps. And immediately I had a bit of a dilemma because I saw this window shape on the pizza box, so it just got me thinking about using that for another project, so I set that aside. I like using cereal boxes, so I took one of those apart as well. Now the card in this is quite a lot thicker than the pizza box, and as I was pulling it apart I was wondering if that was a bit of an impediment, would it be an issue? And I've decided that on many of these journal cards I don't want to sew around them. You can sew around them if you want to, and some of the examples are, but the cereal box is quite thick and I think would be so thick it might be a little bit difficult to put through my sewing machine. So I decided to make these journal cards using the cereal box, but I'm not going to sew these today. I love the colour of the inside of the cereal box, and there's something that happens, and let me know if this makes any sense. When you start your projects you start to feel in the groove, you start to feel with it, and it's the colour, that brown colour on the inside of the cereal box, that makes me feel that I've really got started. I also like the sound of scissors, and well, it's just one of my things. It's part of the enjoyment of the process. Do you love that too? I cut off the flaps and I somewhat randomly cut them down. So the pieces I didn't measure. I did use a larger guillotine just behind me to take those really large pieces down to a smaller size, but you can just use scissors. And the sizes that I started to go for some of them, for the larger pieces, are about 9 centimetres wide and maybe about 13 centimetres tall. But I think one key point here is to have little pieces of card of varying sizes. And don't forget that journal cards can be landscape as well as portrait. So consider cutting your cardstock so that you can use them in that way. And that's the way I actually used some of my journal cards last week in my brown paper packaging journal. Having cut them up, I think I got about 12 from my cereal box and about 8 from the pizza box. I had about 20, and for me that was a really goodly amount to go at. The next thing you want to do is gather your supplies, and I thought the quickest way of sharing what these might be, bearing in mind you'll have different collections of things to use is to just share what I've set out on my desk. So very quickly walking around this from the right, I've got some books here that I'll be using for covering the journal cards, and then these are the ones I mentioned a bit earlier that I steal images from, and I've got a few more of those just at the back here. I've actually raided a lovely bird book there that gets used in my journal cards. It's a great opportunity for using any of your stamps. I prefer acrylic stamps because you can see exactly where your placement is, and the types that I tend to go for making these collage cards is small ones, so you've got that detail. I've got a couple of flowers. These are ideal because you can also paint them. I've got some text for texture, your ubiquitous postal type stamp, and then a couple of the more botanical styles which are incredibly useful. You can see how well these have been used. I think some of these are from Stationery Pal, and I use this ink pad. I use a Ranger archival ink pad, and then that works really well if I want to quickly paint inside any of these images. On my desk when I make these, I have a little plastic wallet with little tiny scraps in, because those are incredibly useful. I pop my scraps in there as I do each project. You can have your washi tapes ready, washi tape shop, washi tape, I think that's Stationery Pal, and I've chosen these two because I've got text on one which gives interest on a journal card, and this has got just a little bit of foil. For images, I have ready a little plastic tub, these are from Temu, I have one with butterflies in of all sorts of types. Some of them are cut out and some of them are waiting to be cut out. I love this one, that's gorgeous. And I have a similar pot with more botanical flower type pictures and images, and they're not all digitals, so you can see at the front here I cut things out of those Reader's Digest books, for example. I love the colour green, and I just pop them in here, then I've got something ready when I need it. I have paint ready, and I really like using, and you'll see later, a little bit of gold and maybe some other metallics creeping in, but I used my very first paint palette in this project. And then the other thing that you want to have ready is a mix of papers of sorts. So I have a couple of wallets here of scrapbook paper. There's one. I don't know why I've got two, but I do. At the front of this one I've got a little bit of my brown paper that I've just splodged some gold paint on, gold acrylic paint. And I also have ready smaller pieces, just somewhat random, of printables. So I do use printables every now and again, and I think they work really well in this project, but I don't want it to be just an exercise of putting a printable on a bit of card. So I really do like to mix it all up, and that for me is the fun, and that's what I'd like to encourage you to do, to just really get your supplies out and from what you have got, mix it up and create whatever collage cards work for you. The next thing I do in my 5-step process is cover the backs of all of the cards. So I do a whole batch at a time, and I typically use book pages and scrapbook paper for the backs. And the sorts of books that I use are these. So your classic fiction that's got a lovely bit of yellowing about the paper. Got a couple of those on the go, as you can see. And I also use something that just looks a little bit more arty. Arty, yeah, let's be a bit arty. So this is a Shakespeare book. It's a book of Shakespeare plays. I love the matte paper, lovely vanilla colour, but I really like the font of the text, and I like the positioning in 2 columns. It's just a bit different. So I use that on the back of quite a lot of my cards. And the other book I pulled out to use when I made a lot of these was a mini atlas. And this is great because you've got that idea, that concept of a map on the back of your journal card, but because it's a mini book, the images and the text are all proportionately small. And I guess that's what I would suggest if you are going to use a just plain textbook, is smaller images in the books that you use are really quite helpful. So why don't we just put one on? I know it sounds simple, but we can tear a page out and just put one on a page. There's something about positioning to share. Let's just pick one of these, shall we? So when I add my book page to the back, and I'm going to use just a glue stick, I do try to make sure that if I've got a page that's wider than my journal card, that I just tear off the blankness. So I'll have a go at doing that. And you can also see that that page isn't big enough for my journal card, which doesn't matter, because on the back we can do just a little bit of filling in. I don't mind a bit of blank at the bottom here. I can do a little bit of filling in with other bits of paper, maybe scrapbook paper. I'll just slide it into position. Try and get it so that I'm seeing all of the text. If that's possible, I might need to cut some off. Not too bad. And what I like to do is not necessarily have a scissor cut edge on any of these. So I tear off and leave it with a little bit of a jagged edge. With all of these cards, every one will be different. So when we get to the end of the video, I'll go through quite a few examples and show you lots of different ways of using your supplies, because every card that I have made, I've just mixed up the use of those supplies in a different way, and the effects I think are worth sharing. I really enjoy making these. So I'm going to put that. It will cover up the title, and I quite like the title and the text. So I look at these and I always think, is this something worth keeping? Is it a font that, or a word that adds to the journal card? Now I've got a really tall one here and I have this space that I need to fill in, and I'm just going to go and use the rule of thirds, where I think I'm going to cover up about a third of the top, so I will sacrifice that title at the top to give my extra bit of scrapbook paper here enough real estate on the back. And if by enough I mean giving it about a third of the quantity of area, and I will leave 2/3 of the area being just the page that we put on. I'm not even worried that I've got that slightly squiffy, because I can always do a slight cover-up job if I want to. And all I do is I go through my various bits of cardstock and add something like that to the back. And I'll say there's a couple of things that happen here. First of all, you get into the groove by doing it. But secondly, I feel something magical happens as you start to turn something like that, that's very plain, especially with that hideous thing on the back, into something that's art by covering it up. And when I feel that process happening, I get more excited and I get more ideas about how I might use some of my other materials. So even if at the start of the project I'm not feeling it and I don't think I know what I'm going to do, I start and it just flows, it just comes. And that's what I did yesterday. I took some more of those cards, and you've got the pizza box and you've got the cereal box. I just added a few items to the back. So just share a few points here. On this one I've got my Shakespeare playbook, but I put the text on the side. Now maybe it could be a card like that, but I think that might be a vertical one. I've just got some scrapbook paper here and across, so I covered up a bit of squiffy gluing. On this one I have already added just an extra bit of a ripped piece of scrapbook paper. I've kept that one plain. On this one it's a mix of Shakespeare and a little bit of digital. That's plain. You can see what I mean. You just get in the flow. I think on that one I've folded it over at the top. Plain. Shakespeare and scrapbook paper, and as I said, I've got, these are really nice. These are the little mini atlas that I showed you. I really like them, they're different, and it's just covering stuff up, and now I've got a mixture of book page and atlas, and I've got atlas and scrapbook paper. So it's all about mixing it up and giving yourself a great quantity of backed cards to go at, which takes us rapidly on to the maybe the most fun step, where we can take our key images and cover the front, and then we're going to add more to the back. But just before we add that image to the front and then maybe add detail to the back, I did say I'd share a few books with you and say why they work for this project. So let me just take a few of these, and quite a few of them are bird books. If you saw my video on saving money, you'll have seen a whole shelf of bird and botanical books on my bookshelf. I'll leave a link to that video in the description box down below. So, Birds of Britain and Europe with North Africa and the Middle East. All of these are charity books. So, in here we've got relatively glossy pages, and I picked it up because there are tons of images in here. And I think the way that I'd use this, because the images are quite small, is I'd probably use them as a smaller piece of interest on the back of the journal card, the collage card, because I don't think they're big enough and strong enough to be sitting in their own right on the front. That might be, if you tore around there, you've got a cluster of 3, it's powerful and it's quite big, and I think that would sit okay. But you can see most of these are just individual small birds. I would use them, but not on the front. Whereas I've deconstructed another book, and these images are just so much bigger, and gloriously I get 2 on a page. So being greedy, I thought I was doing very well when I bought this book. I can't remember the title because, as you can see, it's already been deconstructed, but that one would work really well. I had a bit of a weird book, and this is where this exercise started for me. A couple of years ago, I wasn't really able to get up here in my craft room. I wasn't too well as I am now, and I had a book downstairs on birds, and I just thought, I'm going to use it. Whatever it is, that's what I'm going to use and have a go. And it's slightly different. It's got images like this, so not so much an individual bird as like an ornithologist would present, but still images. And these, I'll show you in the examples later, they work incredibly well. I get something really funky. So I'd use all of these images, and then I'd use the text for covering up the back of the journal card. All of these are brilliant. So have a go with whatever you've got. Even if I've got maps like this on the page, I look at that and I think that's vibrant colour, mix it in with something else, get some contrast. That would be fabulous too. So let me just give you the names of a few other books. Marshland and Freshwater Birds. There we go, ISBN 07064 040776. This one is an absolute win. They're big, and you might need to have journal cards where you allow maybe the back side to be cut off, so you might need to split them in 2 like this one. But those are absolutely superb images. Let's not limit ourselves to birds. Colin's Pocket Guide to Wildflowers. So this one, yes, the images are great. For me, the downside is it's on glossy paper. I tend not to use that as much. But what I could do, and what I have done, is just tear out around one of these. And again, I've used those on the back of my journal cards. I don't mind a little bit of gloss. I just don't want it necessarily on the front. And one of my frequent use books, I've recommended this for a whole load of different projects, is the Kingfisher Concise Field Guide to Animals and Plants of Britain and Europe. And this has got all sorts in. So this has got butterflies, it's got plants, and you can see these are great for putting behind windows of used envelopes. Trees, gorgeous. This sort of size of image I think would work well, and I'd keep some of the text as well. The Reader's Digest Nature Lovers Library, this one is Wildflowers of Britain, is another great resource. these are big enough, although it's slightly glossy paper, to go on the front of one of your collage cards. And in fact, that's what you saw in one of my little plastic tubs earlier. That's what I've been cutting up. So that's another recommendation of a book. And because that series works, I think what I'll use today is a page from my Reader's Digest Birds of Britain. I think I've got 2 or 3 of these. And this is a win on all fronts, because not only have you got large and bold images of birds, they're on matte-ish paper. They're large enough to be your focal point on the front of a collage card. If I've got pages like this with lots of them on, again, those would go on the back as a point of detail. But these are absolutely brilliant for putting on the front. And it means you don't have to have printables or digitals, whatever you want to call them, to do this project, to make beautiful collage cards. So why don't we pull a page out of here and have a go using one of those. I've pulled a page out of my bird book. I haven't thought too long about it. Oh, that's a lovely colour actually, isn't it? This is the card I thought I'd use. It's got text and a bit of scrapbook paper. So I could have it that way or that way. So I look at this and I think, how can I use this image in the best way? So quite big relative to my card. If I had it this way, so upright, just looking at it, I'd be chopping off his beaks and his rear end, which isn't acceptable. I wonder what would happen if we put it horizontally. I think I'm just going to try that, and it's going to go as my main feature, so it's going on here. And just before I put it on, I think what I'll do is cover up a bit more of the blue on here, so that if this isn't big enough, I'm not seeing the cardstock behind. So I've just got a little bit of scrapbook paper, so I'll put that on there. Just tear that off. The other thing I like to do is sometimes just bring it round. In fact, I'm going to do that today. If I've got a bit of excess, bring that round, because it makes the back a bit different as well. Adds a bit of something. I've got that there. Now, if I put that on, I don't want all of the page. I want some other stuff to be seen on the front of that. I've not got my bone folder handy, so I've got to put it out. And give it a bit of interest, give it a bit of shape. Rather have ripping than cutting with scissors. I'll take off, I've got a pointy bit of paper there. I don't like pointy bits. Take a bit off around here. So I'm just following the line of the image that I want, really. So let's see what happens when we put that on. And I can see I've missed a bit. I've got some blue showing through. So we'll see if we've got anything remedial, like in my little area of scraps. Oh, it's brown. Can't beat it. I'll have a bit of that on. That might be enough. I've got a tiny bit more showing. One of my other tips when I use this 5-step process is I focus on colour and not theme. And by that I mean I don't try and have a couple of objectives in my head about making this all look nice by having a theme. I let that go out of the window and I just think about nice colours that go together. And it doesn't mean it's all the same colour, it's just nice. Whatever nice looks like to you, that's better. That's so much better. And now we've got some interest behind, so we've done a little bit of matting. Not the regular matting I do for my journal covers, but torn matting, collage matting, which is why I've called these collage cards. Lovely little arty pieces. I'm going to tidy the bit at the top and leave the wiggly edge at the bottom. And now I've got a card with something on the front, but it's not enough. It needs something down here. And one of my encouragements is to use your stamps and handwriting. So I'm going to add something down here. I haven't done stamping for a very long time. Take an image and that can go off the page but overlapping the green and the bird image to bring it together. Ta-da! Beautiful, nice and crisp. You see how they're different every time, and I'll very quickly just paint that with one of my sets of paints. I try to make the paint see-through enough so that I can still see the crisply stamped fine black image behind, and if I get too much of a blob of paint in one area, I just go back and I lift a bit up and you use that somewhere else. It's just what I do. I'm going to give it a little bit of a base at the bottom. I don't know why, but I like to anchor them. Bit of texture. Don't know what I'm doing, but I like it. And then I think I'm going to just handwrite something on here. Go with the flow. I quite like that so far. What do you think? I couldn't have planned it. I want something on the back, and I think I'll keep it as a horizontal card. So I dived into my little pot. I've made a cute little leaf here. That might be something we could do in a project, in a video together. I've added texture with thread, and I've got paint on the front, but it's 2 or 3 layers and it looks like a leaf. So for some reason I think I'm going to have that on there, and I want something bold on the left. Just a little image from a book, and I've rounded the corner because I want that to emulate the rounded corner on here. And I feel like I want to bring the two together, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a bridge, maybe with a piece of paper. And all I feel this needs is a border, so I'll give it, I think I'll give it just some big dashes. So I've got dashes around the edge here, and a bit of 3D-ness here, and dashes around this. And that's handmade. Yes, it may not be something you have in your collection, but I'm sure you can tear out maybe another image, or it doesn't even need it. But all of this is with either scrapbook paper or book pages and just a little bit of imagination. And those are the 5 steps for mastering the art of collage cards. What I would love to do is invite you to sit next to me, and I'll just go through some of those cards that I showed you at the beginning of the video and point out maybe some examples and give you some inspiration so that you can do this too. I have 2 piles of cards to share. I'll just pick a few of the features out of each. This pile I've used printables on substantially, not wholly, and this pile I've got using substantially or only non-printables, so scrapbook paper and book pages and the like. So why don't we start with, I'll start with a few of the printables just to illustrate a few points. So the butterfly is the reason, the butterfly and the text here is the reason I wanted to share this one. So I think text works really well, and I've kind of got that rule of thirds going with this portion here and blue being about 2/3, and I like my images to span across boundaries. Gorgeous bird that was, I've cut it out and added it to pretty paper behind, and a stunning image which I've added a little bit of a peel off to because I've got them, and I've gone around this with, it's watercolour pencil, I think it was a couple of colours, so they're my Arteza watercolour pencils and I absolutely love them. It's this set They just don't seem to go down. Aren't they lovely? I was an ambassador for them at one point, so I did have an affiliate code. I no longer have a relationship with them, but just fully disclosing that. I really like this because I absolutely love this image. This is a Tracy Fox image from one of her printables, and I put a label behind. I have sewn this one in just plain white cotton. Another bird, a little bit of a flag here, and I've had a tiny little image, a sticker, so I'll put that on there. It's all about using things up. I've got layers of images on this one, lots of lovely layers that all seem to blend into each other in some light pinks. That butterfly again. Tiny cards, so it's good to ring the changes on sizes. So this one, I hope you can see, I've got a little bit of metallic paint on the leaves here. It just brings it out. It's just adding something. And also I've got some nice torn scrapbook paper at the bottom there, and I added a label, and this has got faux stitching just with pen. I've got another of those images and a bit of a sticker and a label behind. A very large one, so again a different size. I've trimmed the corners on this one just to have a change, and I made a quad style backing, so corner to corner of textbook paper and then a couple of other little pieces, and then I just covered up the join with an image, and I've got a bird down there. This one's got a flap. I used this in my brown packaging journal last week, and really I've just gone a bit crazy. There's a bit more of that coloured paper that came from one of those bird books that I showed you earlier. This is scrapbook paper. Mixing things up. There's my postage stamp being stamped on it. On this one I've used my paints, and I've splattered with metallic paint and black. I used an insect on this one. That's a gorgeous image, and just added a little bit of paper in the corner here. And I think I've gone down the edge, down the side with washi tape. It's very colourful on the front. I've got packing paper here that I've painted with acrylic paint, and I've got a mixture of scrapbook papers on the back here, and I've splattered this before I glued it on. I just had put a load of papers in my splat box, and I used copper colours and green, and I kept the dots quite small and bold, and I kept the paint quite thick so the colour comes through. I mean, what's a telephone got to do with a botanical? I don't know, and I don't care. I just like that eclectic feel. A telephone and an interesting bird, scrapbook paper, and again the backing that we go for at the beginning with textbook. Very quick whiz. So that's the one we made, and I hope you can say that that one works. Very interesting. But these are predominantly from just book pages without printables. Birds, I've got a little bit of snippets. I've got a video on my channel making snippets, and having those rolls handy adds just interesting bits to your collage cards when you need them. So you can fill your front with any of those pages that you saw. Active birds, I'm adding labels to this one, and there's a piece of my scrappy snippet. This one I really like, and I think it works because the black here and the white complements the black and white in the bird. Lots of space to write on the back of that. On this one the image was very big, but I cut it so that I just had the faces. How well does that work? I've got some scrappy bits of washi and just various layers on the back. If you have a passion for playing with paper and creating the odd piece of art, then check out the video that I made last week making this brown paper journal. The journal cards would go superbly in it. I think you'd enjoy it, and I hope to see you soon.